Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is a very special one. You all may know him as Amir, the CEO and founder of Doist, the company where I work full-time as the head of remote, but I call him a friend and someone that I look up to and have learned a lot from over the years. He's one of the leading figures in the whole remote work, future of work movement, and someone who has quite an interesting personal story that ties into the whole theme of global mobility, which we're all about here on About Abroad. Amir grew up in Bosnia, had to escape the war as a refugee, ended up in Denmark, and since then has lived in a half a dozen or so other countries around the world while starting multiple tech companies and leading teams across the globe. So we're going to talk about all of that, try to pack it all into a 1-hour conversation here today. And it was just such a nice treat to get some extra time, some personal time with Amir, and to hear more about the pretty incredible story that he lived as a child and what it turned him into today as one of the leaders of a movement all around remote work and leading a team of 100 people distributed across 35 different countries. So fascinating discussion. I really appreciated his time. I hope you guys enjoy this one. Please help me in welcoming Amir to About Abroad. Man, it's so cool to have you on the podcast. I was thinking about this before we got started because I doubt you remember this, but when I first joined Doist, I was there for a few months before I joined the company for our first in-person retreat. It was the one in Iceland. I'm not sure if that one sticks out in your mind, but for me, it was like my first introduction to meeting Doisters, you included. And we had barely had a reason to talk very much before this. And we were at some spa. I think it might have been at the Blue Lagoon, and it was just me and you sitting in the steam room, and I was kind of nervous. I'm I'm sitting here with the CEO now, talking, and you started telling me this out of nowhere. I don't remember what spawned it, but you started telling me this amazing story about your childhood and escaping Bosnia and life as a refugee. And I think we only had 10 minutes, just the two of us, but you ended up telling me the story. It was this awesome connection point, and also your story was super interesting to me as someone who's kind of into these kind of things about global mobility and things like that. When I started thinking about it, I was like, God, it would be so cool to share some of that story with the About Abroad audience. And also there's a bunch of gaps that I'm interested to dive into too. So I have no idea. Do you remember this moment at all or not at all?
Yeah, Chase, I don't remember that episode, but I do remember Iceland. I think it was a fantastic retreat, probably one of the best that we had. So yeah, I have really fond memories, but I don't I don't recall our sauna. So
we've had lots of sauna moments since then.
Yeah. Sauna, it's where you connect with people.
Yeah. I've enjoyed. I'm glad that we've baked that into the. It's a core principle of all Doist retreats. We got to have some sauna time.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fantastic way to connect. Yeah, but we also very extreme at it. So I do very if it's scalable with getting older. I'm actually sure if you get better or worse at being in the sauna as you get older.
We're gonna find out. As long as I'm in charge of retreats at Doist, I guess we will continue to have it baked in, and we'll figure it out as we go. But yeah, let's circle back. I think you're well known in the remote work, future of work space. I mean, a lot of people around the world follow you to have learned from you for the last 15 years. You've been doing this way before many other people. So that aspect of your story, I feel is well documented, well known. And I think some people know a little bit about your personal history, but the story really resonates with the About Abroad audience, I think, because it touches on so many different aspects of, what it means to be sort of a global citizen, to have grown up in multiple places, to now be raising kids with different backgrounds and languages and all of these things. So that's what I really want to dive into today is some of that story that perhaps isn't as well known by the people that follow along and know your work. And so I thought maybe we could just start, if you're okay with it, we'll go all the way back to like childhood and talk about growing up in Bosnia and what you guys went through and how that led you on the path to Denmark and beyond.
Yeah, Chase, I mean, that sounds wonderful. And, like something that I've kind of learned, like I have been exposed to many different like cultures, and also like I come and even like I'm married to like a different culture. Like my wife is Chilean, as you know. And honestly, like I think something I've learned is really like almost across the world, it's kind of the same things people care about. It's like friendship, family, like being valuable, like doing something valuable. That's also super critical for people. And like this is exposed. I mean, I also like lived a bit, I think for a year or two in Taiwan. And honestly, it's kind of the same values. It's just kind of like, yeah. So it's like, I think as a humanity, we have a lot more in common than we have than we think. Yeah. So that's something, like maybe, there's like too much focus on like special, like specific cultures than, like what we have in common. And that maybe creates like this divide that we are seeing. Yeah. So that's at least my experience. And, I can tell you a bit about like how, I mean, we can maybe start like where I grew up, or where I was born, and also like the war situation and stuff like that. And where I kind of ended up like growing real up, like, yeah. So I was actually born in Bosnia in a small town called Jajce. And it's actually like a very, very beautiful place. There's like huge lakes, mountains. There's a like 30 meters like waterfall in the middle of city. And the whole city is kind of like it was there where like the kingdom of Bosnia was like many, many years ago. So like the whole inner city is kind of has a huge wall around it. There's also like some monuments like inside the city center. There's like a monument from the Roman Empire, like a template. Or a temple, sorry, not a temple. And then at the top, there is like San Lucas Church, which is kind of like a ruin right now. But at some point, actually, San Lucas, like one of the, like a very like critical figure in like Christianity, like he was actually buried there. He's not there anymore. And also like at the top of the town, there's also like so at some point actually like we had our own like Christian, like my background is Muslim, but like we had our own Christian Muslim religion. And there's kind of like a underground church, like a Bosnian underground church.
Like physically underground or like in theory?
Yeah. It's carved in stone. Wow. So like when you go there, it's like very, very special. And I don't think like in Europe, there's actually many like churches carved in stone.
So this is a church that was built with like Christianity and Islam baked into it, like a fusion of the two?
No, no. Islam comes after. Like before everything, we had our own religion. So it kind of like, I'm actually unsure, like I don't know much about it. But, I have been to the church. It's very beautiful, just like a monument. So the thing is, this city has a lot of history. And also like what a lot of people also don't really know is like that Yugoslavia was actually formed in Jajce.
Oh, really? In this town, in your town?
Yeah. And it's a super small town. Like it has like maybe 20,000 people. But actually Tito like signed like the papers for starting like Yugoslavia in Jajce.
And explain real quick, just like I'm not going to ask you to do the whole history, but for someone who's listening, probably a younger person who's listening, who's like, Yugoslavia, I know that word. What does it mean? just help us real quick connect those dots between Bosnia and Yugoslavia. If you can do that quickly. I mean, it's a complicated question and subject.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the thing to note is like Yugoslavia was actually like one of the more powerful countries in Europe. And it really consisted of like different countries that are independent right now. So you have like Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Slovenia, Montenegro. That kind of like consisted in Yugoslavia. There was also a great leader there, like some would say dictator, but like he was kind of dictator for life, called Tito. And Tito was really like part of, like fighting the Germans and winning over Germany. Like, the Germany never actually invaded fully like Yugoslavia. And, Tito was a general there. So that's also like why he had so much respect, because he was like a huge part of winning the war. And also something as well is like, unlike like some other countries, like Yugoslavia fought a lot in the Second World War, like almost 1 million like people died.
Yeah, that doesn't get talked about a lot. I feel like that's a little bit lost in the archives of history.
And another thing is kind of like there was also like huge fighting in the First World War, where actually like Yugoslavia was part of like Austria-Hungary. Actually the First World War started in Bosnia, in Sarajevo. You probably know the storyline, but there was like it was quite like critical, but the problem was really that when Tito died, then like he had a lot of power, a lot of respect. He kind of like assembled everybody together. When he died, then kind of like everything kind of fell apart.
When was that roughly? Like what decade?
Yeah, so something to know is like I was born in 85, and in 85 there was like Winter Olympics in Sarajevo. Bosnia was actually the host for Winter Olympics, and like everything was like great, like people were really happy, super excited about this. And then like in 5 years we have the war where everything just like breaks loose and like goes to shit. So actually like my early childhood, like I really have like fun memories, also like where I grew up, like there was a lot of freedom as well. Like, it's kind of like, I don't actually live in the city center of Jajce. I live a bit outside and there's like all greenery. Like we have actually the thing is in Bosnia, it's kind of like you usually like have houses near your family. So like my uncle lived like at the house next by me, my grandma and granddad, like the next house there, my aunt as well. And all your neighbors. And then it's just like, like huge amounts of like greenery and like it's a mountainous country as well, like especially in the Jajce region. So just kind of like to set up context. So honestly, I grew up, and I also grew up like very independently because both my mom and dad worked a lot. So it was basically my grandma that took care of me. Like took care of me. It's kind of like the only thing she did was kind of feed me. And like I was like 4 or 5 at that point, and I couldn't really imagine just like letting like Mike. I have like a 5-year son. Just like let him loose on the streets, like do whatever he wants to do, and like he just comes in for the feeding, and like that's kind of environment that I grew up in.
Sounds pretty idyllic. Like, so you're talking about your really younger years there, but then like, obviously you say, you're born in 85 and 90, you have this terrible war that breaks out and everything gets upended. This is what I recall from our sauna chat and subsequent chats that we've had since then. Like you've referenced, that your family owned grocery stores, for example, and all of that changed. And before you know it, you find yourselves as fleeing this place and having to escape to another place, which just a few years prior, you were living this idyllic lifestyle where your grandmother was letting you run free and this beautiful countryside surrounded by your family. So yeah, I mean, maybe connect those dots for us, because that's what I think can be really inspirational. I think part of why I find this so interesting right now is like, and we've talked about this a little bit off air, is like the connection that you feel to the people of Ukraine who are having to go through something similar right now. And I think for a lot of people around the world, they can't really envision what it's like to be going through this, and you have that experience.
Yeah. I mean, something was like, I don't think 90, like I think 92 is actually where the war really starts. So like I was actually 7 at the time. Honestly, like as a kid, like I don't actually remember, like I was not really aware of the situation that much. So I think that's like very lucky because, like maybe also my family kind of protected me. Like I was actually not really like aware of all the stuff that we're going to. And the thing is also, I don't actually remember much, like almost nothing. So maybe it's also like some trauma that's just like the brain kind of like removes away. Yeah, but I do feel like a lot of pain for like Ukrainian people because, especially like for older people, like for my parents and for my older siblings, it's just very, very hard that you kind of lose everything. Like everything that you kind of have tried to work towards, you lose it just like that, and then you need to like reset everything. And like there's so much uncertainty.
Like in your family situation, like what was I kind of know the story a little bit, but like for instance, your family owned grocery stores, I believe, right? And like had a home, and so you guys left. You had to leave all that behind.
Yeah. And something like I'm not coming from like a very wealthy family, like my parents, they kind of worked themselves up to like providing a great like, future for me and my siblings. And, you lose that like certainty, and I think this is like really, really problematic, because like, yeah, for instance, for my mom and dad, like, they basically started with nothing, and then they went to nothing. And I think that is really, really like very, like my dad, for instance, like I actually didn't really like knew him well, but my brother, like big brother, tells me like he was a very, very different man like before the war, and after the war. So I think especially for him, it kind of created a lot of trauma that he never really resolved. Yeah, it's very, very hard, Yeah, and I honestly don't really think like I can't really understand this. And I think like a lot of people, like you can't really put yourself into the shoes on those positions. And even actually, like being a refugee and escaping, like that is really, really difficult. Like, and for us, like, it was like a nightmare, because the thing we did is like we left without proper passports, like with almost nothing, And just to give you like one example is like we got stuck in Hungary, I think. And like we actually had to like buy passports, fake passports. And like imagine like you go to a city and you need to buy a fake passport. Like you're not going to buy that like from some like like you're going to buy
you're not going to like the mall.
Like so it was like a lot of shady like people that you need to interact with. You had to pay a lot of money to buy like a passport. And then another thing is like one of our friends that was also there, because you're usually in a group, he was kind of like a professor of chemistry at like Sarajevo University, and he could like kind of like figure out how to actually fake the tint so it kind of looked real. It's just like, I would actually love to see like a movie of that, because like,
we're trying to do the next best thing here and describe it, like just because I think it's just mind blowing for someone. Like honestly, how do you go about buying a fake passport? Like and especially like, let's keep in mind, obviously this is way before like smartphones and Google and like the internet where you could like maybe find that information. Even armed with that, I still wouldn't know like what to do exactly. So literally how did you go? Do you have any idea how your parents went about doing that?
Something is like my dad is like very, how do I say that? Like being in like tough situations and like very good negotiator and like, like just kind of being very scrappy and like, so I think that helped a lot. But it is like, it was very, very, very shady. Something to know as well is like my sister actually entered Denmark by a fake name and being a daughter of another family, because the only way we could actually get the paperwork done for her. So imagine, like that was also something that was a concern, because like you're actually a refugee, but like she kind of faked all of her paperwork. And like a lot of
was that because of like a cap? Like they didn't want like a family so large entering or something?
I'm not sure the details, but I think there was a cap of how many like kids you could have on a passport and stuff like that. So that was basically like my sister entered with a fake, like basically fake identity, like she was part of another family. And like actually this was also like a stress factor, because like how would the Danish like people react to this, and honestly like we had, that's also something I'm super grateful for, because like we got a lot of help. And also like just to give like an example of like this situation, there was a woman in the center. So you basically had these like refugee center called Alice, who kind of helped us, like navigate the situation and kind of resolved my sister's paperwork, like without any kind of issues,
I'm trying to envision. So like you guys leave Bosnia physically, like how were you eventually, we know like kind of the quote unquote like end, like you arrived to Denmark. That's where you end up kind of growing up your formidable years, which should spend some time on as well. But like logistically, how you worked your way to Hungary, you guys got fake passports there, you travel across Europe. If I recall, there's a few things I have in my head. Like I have this story in my head about perhaps you like sleeping in a tunnel or a bridge at one point. And then also maybe you got like rejected from one country and then had to go to Denmark. And so correct me where I'm wrong or fill in some of those blanks as we make our journey to Denmark.
Yeah, at some point, like we left like the cars and stuff we had in Croatia, and we basically took a train like across Europe. And the destination was actually Sweden, because my aunt has already gone to Sweden, and we knew that they had like their borders open for refugees. So that was kind of the plan. But the problem is, I mean, honestly, and the whole journey is like super long, and also like on each country, for instance, Hungary, like we probably stayed there for a month because our paperwork was like not good, and we actually like slept at like the metro station.
That's right.
But imagine like so many people sleeping on metro station, and we have like small kids, almost nothing, and it's like winter. It's really, really horrible. Yeah.
So what I'm really interested in now, because I actually have zero idea about this part of the story, and I mean, I know there's a million details we could fill in. We're skipping past some obvious like difficult situations and challenges and everything, but we've only got a certain amount of time here. So we know eventually you arrived to Denmark, and it works out that you guys are accepted in. Perhaps a little bit shady, a little bit illegal, but but Amir's family arrives to Denmark, and I think you've kind of led on to this before, that like you were pretty grateful to Denmark, and like you ended up having like a really good life in Denmark. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, I'm really, really grateful, for Denmark and the Danish people, because we get kind of like a new start. We also get like help, just like getting settled down. My parents actually started a business again in Denmark. And they started like they just like complete the basic Danish, like together, and then they start like a business, which is kind of like, again, like a grocery store, and honestly, like, I think that's like really, really great. And it shows like really, like my parents, like, the spirit of just like going, like losing everything, and then you're just like kickstarting stuff again. And for myself, so I grew up in a really, really small town in Denmark called Maia, which is about like 5,000 people, and it's kind of like, it's like an idyllic, like Danish town. It's kind of perfect. Like it's basically like a suburb, but like a super suburb, because there's like no real big cities nearby. And I'm also, I'm like the only foreigner on the whole school.
Wow.
Yeah. So like,
did you guys get placed there, like as refugees? Did the government tell you where to go, or were you just like, once you're in Denmark, you go where you want? Was there any like direction or regulation in place?
There wasn't really a regulation. I'm actually unsure like how my parents ended up, because like that wasn't the common route. Like most other like Bosnian families, they kind of like flock to like a few like cities, like bigger cities, and then like in these like clustered neighborhoods where we have like other Bosnians around you. For myself, like I was just like in the middle of like of nowhere, because like I just had like Danish people around me. And something as well to note here is like I actually start a real school on the fourth grade. So that's where I actually enter like a real school. Before that, I was kind of part of like these refugee schools where like and I don't actually have a lot of like Danish as well. So I start without like speaking a lot of like Danish. I just get thrown into this.
Yeah, you're the foreign kid that doesn't speak the local language and has really not had school before this, and now you're supposed to like be thrown into this childhood experience.
Exactly. So that's kind of like the setup for me. And honestly, like I'm also like, I'm super non-disciplined, because I basically have like zero like real discipline, or like, and the first like many years, like actually they think like I have like learning disabilities, because I'm just like so much behind on like the basic stuff, and like combined with that I don't really like, like for instance like homework, like I really didn't do much for homework, like so actually like on the last evaluation, like where they actually need to kind of recommend you for something, what they recommended wasn't like higher education. It was kind of like, okay, we think Amir is probably better that he goes and does something with his hands, because like,
He's obviously not that intelligent, but maybe he's a craftsman.
Yeah. But honestly, I don't really blame them, because like I had really bad discipline. I had like I lacked so many years of like start education, or, the basic education. So I actually I only caught up maybe like during high school and like university, where I kind of felt like, okay, now I'm kind of on par with the others. But before that, it was kind of a struggle. Yeah.
Interesting. We'll be right back to the show after a quick break for a note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by my good friends over at Greenback Tax. As an American citizen, I'm from one of only 2 countries in the entire world that requires I pay taxes on my global income, regardless of which country I'm actually living in. So when I started my expat journey back in 2015, I knew my tax situation was about to get complicated. Fortunately, I discovered Greenback, and I've never looked back. Greenback is 100% focused on helping U.S. expats with their tax situation, and to date, they've filed almost 50,000 returns for nearly 15,000 happy customers from more than 200 different countries. After 7 years working together, I can say with confidence that they make one of the most painful parts of life abroad an absolute breeze with their automated systems, friendly advisors, and expertise in the very specific niche of U.S. expat taxes. Also, for those of you who may have fallen behind on your taxes and/or you're trying to get ahead of tax season in 2023, Greenback has your back here as well. They can assist with late filings to ensure you don't encounter any problems with the IRS and to make sure you start 2023 off right. Tax season is on the horizon. Learn more about Greenback today by going to greenbacktaxservices.com via the link in the show notes. Hey guys, if you're still around and enjoying this episode, then I think you might actually like our once a month newsletter as well. If you'd like to sign up, just open up the show notes of the episode you're currently listening to, scroll down, and look for aboutabroad.com/newsletter. It takes about 30 seconds to sign up. It's a fantastic way to support the show, and I think you'll be pleased with the information that we provide every month as well. Thanks a lot for listening. Hope you enjoy the rest of the episode. And did you pick up Danish pretty quick? Like, how did you find learning Danish? I kind of assume there's no connection between Bosnian and Danish in terms of language, but maybe I'm wrong.
No. I mean, Bosnian is like a Slavic language and Danish is a Germanic. So like there's very few like words in common or structures in common. Yeah. But honestly, as a kid, like you get just thrown into this. Like I don't even like recall when I learned Danish, because you're on a playground, like you just get exposed to this and then you just quickly pick it up. Like
Yeah. I mean, you're experiencing that now with your kids, right? Like I think you told me. I mean, your kids are learning four languages, maybe 5, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, I mean, they are learning 4. Yeah, so they're learning like English, Spanish, Bosnian, and then Catalan. So
Danish got cut, huh?
Yeah, Danish got cut. Yeah,
There's plenty of years to learn Danish.
Yeah, actually, my wife wants them to learn Danish so they can kind of go and study in Denmark, but we'll see about that. Yeah.
Yeah. School in Barcelona, is that like they're going to learn Catalan and Spanish by default, and then I guess English gets mixed in there, but you guys speak Spanish at home?
Yeah, we speak Spanish at home, and like we have actually them going into like English school because we just think like it's a super critical language to learn, in like a global world, and they will learn like Spanish anyway, and then like they also have some exposure to Catalan. But like, yeah, the problem like with these small languages like Bosnian and Catalan is like they don't really open a lot of doors, it's very good for like local community and like, family relations, but like it's much better or important, more critical for us, important than like masters of English or Spanish than like minor languages.
Yeah. It's kind of tough to justify like really investing a lot in, maybe later in life or something, but especially when you're going to pick up some of it through osmosis anyway. And you have such a unique perspective on this because you're born in Bosnia, your family's there, you moved to Denmark, 2 languages that are, not like widely adopted by the rest of the world. You learn those, you pick up English. You go to Chile at some point and start tech companies and marry a Chilean, learn Spanish, and now you're living in Barcelona where everybody speaks Catalan. So I think you don't need any more languages in your head.
Exactly. Yeah. Honestly, I think like maybe it's a bit overrated, like this, like language fascination. Yeah. Like I would actually prefer if everything was just like one language, like Esperanto or something like that.
Maybe we could push that forward. It's really, I don't know, man. It's so interesting to see like hearing your experience as a child. Like the word that keeps coming to mind when you were talking about your dad, when you're talking about you, is like resiliency. Like you guys had to overcome a lot. You weren't like given the golden parachute of like, here everything is laid out in front of you on your path to being the founder and CEO of a successful tech company, a bootstrapped successful tech company at that. Do you ever reflect on that? Like, do you feel proud of how far you've come and like considering where you came from and where you are now? Do you take any time to revel in that?
I mean, something is like, I'm actually really, really grateful. Of course, my childhood was like super tough, but I think also sometimes like that's a fear I have actually for my kids. It's like they will have way too easy life. I think actually you need like some challenges in your childhood to kind of like, grow. And maybe like for some people they can be like destructive, but for me, it was kind of like, I think a very good thing because it kind of made me, I think, better. And this said also, I mean, growing up in Denmark was a huge advantage. I got like a free education. Like it didn't really matter who my parents were. I studied in a very, very good university, like probably one of the best like computer science universities in the world. So like I was very privileged in that sense. So I think definitely it was tough, but I also think like I was super privileged, and like I'm super grateful also for like growing up in that environment. So that's also something that I think about as well. It's kind of like, for instance, my dad, like he was actually really, really great at like business stuff, like really great at math. But the problem is he almost had zero education, like formal education. Like he would have been so much better if he had proper education, if he read a lot, like he would have just have been much, much better. So that's also like something that I think about. And even right now, I think like with the kids today, like also I feel like we as parents, like of course you're not a parent, but I feel like parents today are also just like much, much better parents than. So like I hope like our kids will be even more fortunate than I was, and like my parents were. Because honestly, like for my parents, like they had really, really tough like childhoods and stuff like that. I don't really think I had, it was tough, but like nothing on that scale of the previous generations, I think.
Hopefully each generation is building a better future for the next generation, and it hasn't always worked like that throughout history. But I mean, I think there's statistics that show like right now we're even despite all the terrible things that are happening in the world, like we're in the most like the safest and most prosperous time in the history of human history. So like there's something to be said for that.
Yeah. There's like this podcast, Hardcore History, that is very, very great. And, just listening to that, like you kind of like see how shitty the past was, and like you never actually want to be part of that. So Chase, something I'm actually curious about, and you probably don't get asked a lot, like how was actually your childhood? I don't think I've ever asked that.
I like it.
I don't think I've ever asked you this. Yeah.
That's a very fair question, since I'm drilling you on yours, and you're right. Yeah, nobody's ever asked me on this, so thanks for turning the mic around. I had the uber privileged, everything laid out for me growing up in middle class North Carolina in the U.S. My dad was a pilot. My mom was a nurse. She went back to school to become a nurse while I was 8 or 10 years old or something like that. Yeah, I mean, I grew up. One of the cool things about my childhood that I love is like I had it was very nice. I was in a neighborhood with a lot of other kids, and I was surrounded by a lot of people, and my parents were also really big on us being involved in a lot of like activities. So I just had a very eventful life, which I kind of like to mimic. And my wife likes to get upset with me sometimes, like, can we just slow down? Can we just not do something and I just didn't grow up that way. There was lots of like stimulation, which was great, like socially, and exposed me to a lot of things. And I also grew up in an area that was really diverse. Like I don't think most people would think US, North Carolina, not a major city, just kind of like suburbia. But where I grew up was like really diverse. My school was very mixed, like racially, and we had a lot of immigrants and refugees and people that came from a lot of different socioeconomic backgrounds, which I think is kind of unique in the way that our school systems are set up there. So I had this really cool experience of just being surrounded by people from all over the world, from very different backgrounds. And we had a massive like ESL program called like English as a second language. So lots of people coming in that didn't speak English and had to learn English, all throughout my like elementary, middle school, high school. So I was very interested in this. Like I was always like making friends with the new kids that were coming, and we couldn't really communicate with each other. And like when a new kid would come in from another place, like they would assign me to him, and like he or she, and I'd like introduce them to the school and stuff like this. So I think that's one of the things I'm really appreciative. Like my parents taught me a lot of like, like pay it forward, be kind to people, like especially people who might not have everything that we have. And then because of that, I was exposed to a lot of different things from a lot of different corners of the world, and just found like a interest in this from a very early age. When I think back on my childhood, like these are the things that really come to mind.
I mean, that could also explain like the global mindset that you have,
Yeah, I think there's definitely like a red thread that connects there. I mean, I don't know if I told you this, but like when I came to Doist, like one of the things that I was purposefully seeking, like I just wanted to be in an international environment. Like I just didn't want to be surrounded by people that were like looked and sounded just like me. And so I didn't really care as much about like the products, as much as like two things, like location independence and working around a bunch of people from a bunch of different places in the world. And obviously I found that at Doist, we were a lot smaller then, but like even still, I think we were like 40 people from 20 different countries or something. And I was just like blown away, like, oh man, I hear all these different languages or accents every day. And totally stimulating for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing environment. Like I think our remote environments are amazing. Just like meeting people around the world, working with them and understanding them.
It adds a lot because you get people who are injecting different backgrounds and biases and points of view, education. Like the way somebody's taught how to approach something in Taiwan is very different from how someone's taught how to do something in Mexico. And like so, you infuse that in, and then also just like getting the stimulation of hearing these different perspectives is really helpful. I think keeps you on your toes. You can't get bored in this environment. I'm preaching to the choir, I know. Well, I know I've got to get you out of here pretty soon. So, and there's a ton more that we won't get a chance to dive into today. But first of all, thanks for sharing your story and like more about your personal life. Secondly, I was wondering if you could leave us with like a couple things. Like as far as I can tell, I would say like you've lived in 5 places. Like you have Bosnia, you have Denmark, you now have Spain, and in between like Chile and Taiwan. Would you say that's correct, or would you remove any of those from the quote unquote places you've lived?
That is correct. Yeah. I mean, that kind of sums that up. Yeah. I actually like something that maybe some people don't really know as well. It's kind of like the way that we actually selected Barcelona is me and my wife, like before we got kids, we kind of visited different like cities and tried to live a bit in them to kind of see like if it fits us. Yeah. So I lived like in a few more places. Like I lived, for instance, like in Berlin for a bit.
In Porto.
In Porto, I lived also a bit in San Francisco as well. Yeah, so there's like a bit more to that, but but like it wasn't like as intense or like as long as the other states. I mean, Porto was actually more than it was 3 or 4 years, so that could probably be added there. The other places were kind of like a few months or like a month or two in a location.
Okay. Yeah, so there's too many to go through what I was just thinking, so I'm going to scrap that idea and we're going to do something else. Also, one clarification, you now split your time kind of between Barcelona and Chile. You kind of like perpetually chasing summer. Is that right?
I mean, we were doing that, but like the problem is like with having kids is like that becomes much more problematic. So right now we actually just living in maybe like 3 or 4 weeks in Chile a year, which is still kind of nice. Like when it's winter in Europe, we just go to Chile and get the summer boost. But it was much nicer like before, like especially before like the kids got bigger. Like my son is 5 and just taking like out of school for like a few months, like like not many schools will accept that that system. Is not super compatible, but like before we did that, and that was a fantastic. Like I can really recommend, like splitting your time between like northern and southern hemispheres, and like either getting the double winter or double summer. Of course, double summer is maybe better, but
yeah,
that's
depending on your preferences. Okay, gotcha. What I'm just curious. I want to kind of leave on this note. Actually, let me ask you 2 final questions, and the first one you can answer both of them really quickly or however you want. You're the guest. But the first one just being, what's your relationship like with Bosnia now? I'm curious. Like you left it. You've had several chapters in your life. So like, what does it look like with you in your home country now?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually like 2 weeks ago in Sarajevo, like attending like a Sting concert, and it was beautiful. I noticed like I do still like, if you ask me like, like how, like what nationality I have, I would probably say Bosnian, because that's kind of like what I feel like. They said I have like so many influences from Danish culture as well. Like I grew up there. A lot of my near friends are also Danish. So I would probably say Bosnian Danish, but I still like very feel like I feel like a real passion for Bosnia. I also hope as I get older, I can kind of like do more stuff to help out, because the situation there is still very dire. The country doesn't really have a lot of future, and there's like still like many different problems. I think like especially for youth, they don't really have like a great setup for have a great life. Like education kind of isn't very good. They don't really have great prospects. And I mean, honestly, I guess I spent 2 weeks in Sarajevo, and it was amazing. People were actually quite happy, and I think Bosnia could have a great future. And I think the whole Balkan region could do as well. But there's also like some other stuff that is kind of like the politics really sucks. There's still like a lot of like primitive thoughts, or like just I feel like the societies there have not really advanced a lot, and of course like having huge wars, it's a huge setback, and like the whole region is kind of still recovering from that. And then also, I mean, we could have been much smarter in general, as a region there. So I feel like there's a lot of work to be done, and I especially feel like sad for the youth. So that is, it's like I really feel warm, and I want to do my contribution at some point there. Like I'm doing some stuff like donations and stuff, but I really want to make that a higher priority at some point. Yeah.
All right. Do you want to use this moment now to announce your candidacy for Bosnian president? Is that what we're doing?
I'm never going to go into politics. Yeah.
There's enough politics at a 100-person company. I don't think you want more.
Yeah.
Well, having said all that, Bosnia is a beautiful place, and it's become a place that a lot of people really want to go travel to. I remember when I was studying abroad in university, and people talking about like, we're kind of taking this like adventurous trip to Bosnia, like you've done Paris and Amsterdam and Oktoberfest and Munich, but like, so we're going to go off the beaten path now and go to Bosnia. And I remember thinking like, wow, that's adventurous at that time. And now it's it's all over Instagram. You see the famous picture there, and with the bridge and the river running through one of the beautiful towns, and so it's become a place that people talk about the coastline and all that. So it's from a tourism standpoint, I think it's more on the map than it was at one point, and will hopefully continue to prosper in other ways. The last question I just want to ask you, and I think I would be like, for all the people who follow you for all your work and remote work and future of work and all of that, I think I'd be like remiss not to ask, but what influence do you feel like all this your personal life, I mean, all these different places you've lived, and the trials and tribulations of traveling as a refugee and forming your own identity in a new country, all these things, like you're now, if you connect that to your work, I mean, there's a lot of parallels, there's a lot of things that make a lot of sense there. I mean, you're advocating for a world where there are fewer borders and restrictions in terms of like how you access work. Do you think those things are connected, or maybe another way to ask is like, do you think those childhood experiences, your life experience, has influenced the way you feel about the quote unquote future of work?
I mean, that's an excellent question, Chase. I mean, something that is like, like my family has actually lived in this small town for like 500 years or more. Like we have records. And, I'm kind of the first like international, like probably that's like kind of ventured out of this like small town. And I think that's like the beauty of our world. It's kind of like, everything is like much more global, much more interconnected. And even something as well, like I actually have a nephew in Bosnia right now that's like working for HI Proxy, which is kind of like, it's a US company, and he's working remotely. And I think that's also like beautiful. That's something that I think like remote work is kind of like, you don't actually need to move out. You can actually still be there, earn great salary. And that kind of has like rippling effects in the local economies. And I think this can really be a huge like difference, because we don't need to like center all of the wealth and all of the jobs in like small places. You can just like distribute them around. And I think honestly, like this will create a much better like world and a society. So for me, that's kind of also like the second order effects I can see of all of this is kind of just like creating more opportunities. And also something as well is I believe intelligence is kind of like evenly distributed, and creativity as well, and all other stuff. So like you have geniuses everywhere in the world, and like we just need to kind of create opportunities for them, but also like we really need to create like a foundation layer for them. And I think that's like one of the struggles, for instance, in Bosnia right now isn't like the talent. Maybe it's really that the education system like so broken that once they get like on the job market, they've had like 20 years of disadvantage. So and Bosnia is still like kind of much better than like if you go to Africa, or whatever. So for me, that's at least like something that kind of connect is kind of like I would love to create a world, or like help creating a world where kind of like opportunity is available to everybody, including when they start out. And for myself, like it was amazing to grow up in Denmark, and like I'm pretty sure like that has affected a ton of where I ended up, and it would be amazing to kind of have this for more people around the world.
Yeah, they say like talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not, and that's like a big part of the problem we're trying to solve in our own little way. So, Amir, man, this was awesome. Thank you for taking some time out of your busy day. It's fun to chat with you about this stuff and not like the Doist system and work and things like that. So I wish we got to do this more, but it's awesome you took some time to share the story. So thanks a lot, man. I'll let you get back to it.
Thank you, Chase. Thanks for having me here. It was really awesome. And I can see my small kid is like knocking on the door. He wants he wants to enter.
You are needed.
Yeah.
Well, apologize to him on my behalf. And see you around in Twist.
Bye, Chase.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. For those of you wondering how you can best support the show, I have made it super simple for you. Just go over to the show notes of the episode that you just finished listening to and click on one of the two following links. aboutabroad.com/newsletter to get our monthly newsletter, no spam, guaranteed, or ratethispodcast.com/aboutabroad, where you can quickly and easily leave a review for the show. It's not just important to me, it also helps more wanderers just like you find us. Finally, don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and we will see you again next week. Thanks again. Hasta luego, amigos.